I want to welcome each and every one of you all to Cabela's today. I appreciate everyone coming out, and hopefully everybody's able to take something away from this that's going to help them find and catch more fish. For you all who don't know us, I am Jeremy Mattingly. This is my fishing partner.
I'm Dustin Parks.
We fished the American Crappie Trail. We had a top 10 in the National Classic with Crappie USA on the pro side last year. And so with that, we'll get started. I want to harp on this as much as I possibly can. The very first thing when you're fishing is safety. Wear your life jacket. The reason I brought it up here was to show you these are light. They let you have some mobility, a lot more than what the traditional life jackets have. But see that window in the front? Shows red. Fishing and firearms. Red means dead. Okay? Safety's off. Your gun's hot. It's showing red. Your life jacket is discharged. It's not going to work. It shows red. If you see red, you need to replace the cartridge. In the woods and on the water, there's morals and values that cannot be taught or learned any other place. It's the only place that they're going to get these morals and values. So I'm done harping on that. Be safe. Take a kid anytime you can. My personal preference is an egg style floater. And when that I'm fishing with this bobber, whether it's off the bank or off the boat, I only connect it on one end. That way my bobber with the weight of my jig will stay in the upright position. A lot of times the crappie will hit and they'll bite up. They'll relieve the pressure from the bobber and it'll fall over on its side. Set the hook, guys. You've just been hit. That fish has got that bait in its mouth. Until that bobber comes back up, he still has the pressure. He still has that jig head lifted up. So that fish is on there.
So any movement of that floater, any moving sideways or just a little small bounce that you think, well, I'm waiting for an entire floater to go under the water, you don't have to. These crappie, they bite really, really light sometimes. So, you know, they have it in their mouth, and just because they're not pulling it completely under, go ahead and give that hook a set. And more than likely 90% of the time, that fish, you're going to catch it, or at least hook it.
And some of you all that sat in last night, you've heard me say this, and I'll say it 1,000 more times. Hook sets are free. They don't cost you nothing. If you see a tick on that bobber, you set that hook. The only thing they'll ever cost you is a little bit of pride sometimes. And that's it. Their hook sets are completely free. But I like this rod for bank fishing and for casting because it's versatile. I don't like spending a whole bunch of money on 50 different things and cluttering up my boat where I can't even walk. So the reason I like this, if that I am fishing without a bobber, it's got the cork handle, it's got the notch in the blank of the rod, so you can lay your finger and actually feel the blank of the rod. So when you're looking for those real light bites, a lot of times you'll see your line jump when you cast and you're letting it fall. You want to let it fall on a loose line. And you'll see your line jump, right? Or we call them ticks. You see that tick, set the hook. But sometimes it takes feel. Well, eliminating as much variables as possible is going to help you feel that bite by being able to lay your finger straight on the rod blank without having to grab way up here above it to be able to get in contact with the rod blank. You can see this pole, it is made for dock shooting. It has a good stout backbone, and then it starts to load up about 3/4 way up. And that's where that I want my rod to load up at, is about 3/4 way up. Because I know I can boat flip a 1.5 pound crappie, and I've got the light action on the end of the rod so that I can feel or see the bite. And back to the reason that this is my pick, these came straight off of my boat. You can see the mud in the reel. That's because I use them to fish. The reason I like this is because we've all been in that situation from a bank or from a boat. You've got a spot that you're wanting to fish. You can see the brush pile. You know it's there, but it's got a low hanging limb coming out on top of it. Maybe you can't cast or sidearm because you've got a limb over your head or you've got a bush or something to your side. This eliminates a lot of movement, and you can fish with more people on a boat, especially with children. My son started being able to dock shoot when he was 5. So these are kid-friendly rods, and I use it, my wife uses it, we all use it. And the reason is I can eliminate all this movement, all the possibility of somebody catching a hook to the side of the head. Because this is a shark shooter, it is designed for dock shooting.
And it's also very versatile for casting. It's 6 foot long. A lot of your casting reels traditionally are, people think of 7 feet. So he's using a jig head, and even with that jig head, the weight of it will pull that floater, it'll propel it up underneath those limbs, even up under a dock. If you like fishing with a floater, you know, if you have a dock that's off the water or back of a pontoon, and you want to be able to see that floater, fish with a floater, well, the weight of the jig head will also help pull it in. And make sure you hold on that jig head, not the hook.
You put your fingers over its eyes. Do not grab that hook. You will have a very, very bad day. Grab the jig head, cover its eyes up. See no evil. Keep that in your head. See no evil. But a reason that you would want to shoot the bobber with the jig head, like he was saying, if you're shooting just a jig head and you've only got 2 feet of water back there that the crappie are up in, like right now, they're getting ready to go up that shallow. Well, if you shoot in there with just a jig head, you automatically got to start reeling out, or your jig head is laying on the bottom. You can shoot the bobber back there, set it at a foot deep or whatever that you need to be able to stay in the center of the water column back there. Shoot the bobber, and then you can slow jig it back out. The more time you put that jig in front of their face, the more likely you are to get that bite. You want to increase your odds as much as humanly possible. So, there's a saying, 90% of the fish live in 10% of the water. That is very, very true. The saying they don't tell you is that 90% of the fish get caught by 10% of the fishermen. And that is very, very true. And understanding to fish in eddies, we're getting ready to go to talking about single pole fishing. And you'll either want to find structure or an eddy, a break in the water current that slows down. And if you can find both, then you got the winning ticket. A good way to find those is to look for bends on, if you're going before you go, looking at Navionics or a map, you've got to locate where the dam is so you know where the water's coming out. You've got to, that way you know which way the current is going. And then get behind humps. Most of the time on the inside bend is where you'll find the fish. Most of the time. If there's no current whatsoever, they'll venture out to the outside bend, but most of the time they're going to be on the inside bend.
And any kind of points, your tributaries that come off the main lake, your main river structure, or your main lake structure, call them fingers, points, sloughs. There's lots of different things you can call them. But those points go from shallow to deep. And in the main river, it makes a roll. And when that current is going toward the dam, the water that comes out of these creeks go over top of this point where that is actually a roll, get back toward the dam. So on the back side of that point or hump is generally where your crappie are going to be located, from top to the back side. Unless there's no current, and then like he said, then they can move on out.
They'll be roaming
into more slack water to where they're not fighting any current.
Crappie are not endurance fish. They are not endurance fish. They need a place to take a break. And the best way to explain it is they need their couch to sit on. So they're going to get in that eddy being their couch. And then when they get hungry, they're going to go up, they're going to grab their potato chip, and they're going to go straight back to that couch. Because they can't stay out there like that. If you're in a major current, crappie will consolidate. Once you find them, you're in business. But finding them is very hard. They'll be on the down current side of a big piece of structure. And that's their couch. They're looking for the couch. They want to sit down and take them a break. And then they'll swim out, grab it, and go right back. So that is where you would want to look. Start with visible stuff. If you're heading down the lake, you know you're on a stretch that don't have a lot of timber, a lot of structure, you see something, you can see the current coming around it, stop and fish that dude. Stop and fish on the back side of it, or go to the front and let your lure come around it as a bait fish would be going. That way you're not doing something that's unnatural.
And these eddies, they work both ways. If you're in 10 feet of water and you have a hole, which is called a pond, on your Navionics or any of your depth finders, and it'll drop into 8 feet of water just in one spot, like a hole or a pond. It's like an invisible pond, but it's in the bottom of the lake. As the current comes over top of that deeper water from shallower to deeper, it also creates an eddy. The current goes over top of these fish. They've got now 2 to 4 foot of water underneath of this current that they can get down into and be out of that current. And most times you getting through those impressions, ponds, holes, it's usually a pretty good place to pinpoint crappie also.
If you're in a bay and your fishing structure that you fished 100 times and you know there should be fish there, or you're seeing them on your Navionics, your side scan, whatever unit you use, but they're not biting and you've got a fresh inlet of water coming in, you need to stop what you're doing and go to the other side and get away from that fresh water. Crappie do not like fresh water. That's why nobody fishes the day after it rains for the most part. It's because they're harder to catch. They don't like fresh water. So simply by going to the other side of the bay, that's where your active fish are going to be at. They're not going to be over right in front of that fresh water inlet. So that's just one thing to keep in your head. If you got a creek, brook, whatever you want to call it, coming down, ditch with water running in, go to the other side. They don't like that way. Single poling. I generally use a 10 or 11 foot rod, and that's to get me as far away from the boat as humanly possible and allow me to be able to reach out and get underneath the limb, over a limb, under a limb, and then drop right down in the middle of that brush pile. Right here's my drag. This is my depth setting. I will set my pole most of the time to the length of my rod, so that, like, this rod's 11 foot, I know that I'm 11 foot deep. So that's how that I know how deep I am. If I see the fish at 9 foot, I grab my line, I pull it out just past my hip, and I know that I'm right about 9 foot deep. And that's how that I would jig. I generally use the cheapest reel that I can possibly find to put on my jig pole, because I don't use the drag anyways. You are your own drag because you've got the line here, which will help you feel the bite, and it lets you be your own drag. And you don't want a really stiff pole in most cases, because you want that rod to bend to help you with the drag. And like I said a while ago, if you all were here right before we started, Dustin dropped a jig in here and they didn't pay a whole lot of attention to it. The water was running. Here comes old Big Bertha.
This crappie, they're pushed up. There's some grass and a few little limbs in the very back. They're all pushed up right against that wall in that cover, hiding. What you got there? He's giving just a small movement.
That one. He's got teeth.
He's giving just a small wiggle, a small movement with the end of that pole to make that jig just bounce.
You
don't want to jerk your pole and make your jig bounce a foot at a time from here to here. Just get just a small movement, whether it's up or down. It's just enough to get their attention, or even a slow pull, just to make that bait move in the water, enough to catch their attention.
See what that tail, and then drop. You want to start off slow. You don't want to get real aggressive off the start. Now, if you're in there and you're doing small, I mean, I'm just barely am, you can actually do it with your fingers on the line, just a small little movement. And then if you don't get bit, then try hitting it a little bit harder. Try a little bit more action. But a lot of times you'll get hit on the fall.
These crappie, they look up. Their eyes are set in the tops of their heads, and they see upward because of that. So you want to try, if you see the fish on your sonar, or you know where your brush pile is in the water and how deep it is, generally your most active fish are going to be sitting right on top of your brush pile, the ones that are feeding. Once you catch those fish, or if they're buried into the brush like they are here hiding, you almost have to get your jig inside of that brush. You know, you're going to get snagged up. You're going to get hung up. They make weedless hooks to get into brush like this to help from getting snagged so much. But if you were to drop in there and you get snagged trying to get one of those fish to bite, just the weight of the jig head sometimes when you go to pull it up out of it, if you get snagged and stuck, don't just go to pulling automatically, well, I'm gonna drag this thing out, I'm gonna pull it out. Kind of let that, just give a little slack and let it, the weight of the jig head, drop the hook down, whatever, because most of the time the water has the cover, the wood soft, so it's pretty soft, and just the weight of the jig head will actually pull itself out. You just kind of work it up and down there a few times. A lot of times it'll bring it out for you.
And these fish also know that Big Bertha is sitting there waiting for them to come out. Last weekend, we thought we'd lost a couple crappie in there because we got them to come out, and Big Bertha was on it now. That dude right there can move. But dropping straight down through the brush pile, most of the time we fish a little bit different, me and him, and which works out good because we're giving more than one presentation. I like a heavier jig head in most situations, because like those fish are buried up in that brush pile, and I want to drop straight down in it without a lot of side-to-side movement, because I don't want to get wrapped up in all the limbs on my way down. So I use a 1/4 ounce head, drop straight down in the middle of it, jig, and I also use braided line on my jig pole. This right here is a 20-pound test braid, but it's only the diameter of a 4-pound test. So I'm not losing anything visual there to the crappie to spook them or anything like that by using a great big fat line, because it's the same diameter. But what I do gain is the ability to drag them fish out without letting them wrap me around every single stick that's down there. And having a pole with enough backbone to pull that fish out, I have personally thrown 1 3/4 fish up on the bank with this. Everyday people. Dustin is a mason by trade. He lays brick and block. I'm a general contractor by trade. We do everything. I laid tile last Monday. Week before that, we was pouring concrete. Week before that, we was putting on roofing. We're everyday people. Underneath these jerseys is a pair of blue jeans and work boots in most situations. We're all here to help. Even, and I'm speaking for a lot of the other guys. If you see a dude with B&M on his shirt, and that's why I'm proud to fly it on mine, you can stop and talk to him, and he's going to answer the question. Just dropped into that brush pile, didn't get a bite. What do I do? I try something different. You've always got to be versatile, and you've got to not be set in a closed-minded mindset. You have to be open-minded to changing something, whether it's your presentation, the color of your jig, or possibly just what you're doing in general. You might need to move to a different brush pile on the other side. But I always, especially after I've caught fish, you caught 7 or 8 good fish off one pile, they quit biting, the rest of them fish ain't went nowhere. They just saw you pull 7 or 8 of their buddies out with something orange colored.
I was using that white jig, yeah. So
then you switch colors and throw right back in there.
Throw something 100% different in another direction, a bright color, an orange.
Which that's exactly what we do. I just had dropped that orange in there a few minutes ago, so now I was throwing the birthday cake on there, and I was going to drop it in there and see what type of reaction I got there.
So if that don't work, go in between.
Change with something else.
Throw a different one on there. Try it again in the same spot.
Because those fish, they will start to smarten up to what's going on once they keep on seeing you drag your buddies out. So just swap your bait colors and try something different. A lot of y'all can't see that. I always tie my jig heads with a loop knot so that they are free to hang as horizontal as possible. Because bait fish don't swim vertical, so why should your bait? So that's why I do the loop knot. And if you're in really muddy water, you can take a glass, don't get a plastic or a porcelain, glass bead, just a small bead, tie it on with your loop knot, and then as you're jigging in muddy water when they can't find you, because you're talking 12-inch visibility at best, they'll hear that click, 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 click the whole time you're sitting there jigging. They'll hear that clicking. And right there, it is no more than what I'm moving. That's what I'm looking for in most cases. Just a very light presentation. Now, if that don't work, then start jigging it a foot. Try it. Raise up a foot. Do the same thing. Raise up another foot. Fish from the bottom all the way to the top. Most of the time, except during the spawn, well, even during the spawn, you're going to find your crappie closer to the bottom. Okay, and even though they say in fish shallow, the crappie are in 4 foot of water, but most of the time they're 3 foot down. They're close to the bottom. And a lot of times in 20 foot of water, they'll be 19 foot down, or they'll be laying belly down in the mud. When you pull them out, they got mud all in their fins. It's because they're on the bottom.
And you'll find this more true as the weather heats up. You get towards summertime, and after the spawn and the water temperature starts rising, those fish will go down toward the bottom more and dropping it down.
And let's be honest, who cares if you're getting hung up and breaking off and catching fish?
Right. I mean, they got weedless jig heads. It has it's usually plastic or just a small piece of cable steel that sticks off the front of this jig head that prevents the tip of the hook from snagging into cover as easily.
Can't show you the tip of my hook because I had to cut it off.
Right.
We couldn't drop in there with anything with a barb on it. They might have thrown us out on our ears. But right now, something along that line, 1 3/4 to 2 inch is going to be your ticket. The water's cold, the fish aren't moving near as much. They don't want to expend the energy. But right now, when you find them, you don't find 1 or 2. There's in mega schools right now. I came across the school of fish the other day. I would say that there's probably close to 300, 400 large crappie. Over a pound in that one school. As the water temperature drops, they'll start schooling up out on main lake points, the edge of the ledge of a river channel. They'll be just schooled up hanging out there. If you can find an old stump on the edge of that ledge, they like the ledges because as the temperature fluctuates, as it does every single day here, they can move down the ledge and back up the ledge to better suit the environment that they need because of the change in water temperature. I don't know of any studies on barometric pressure, but I think that's got a lot to do with everything. I know I live by deer hunting, and I'm getting that way with crappie fishing too, as far as where it is that I look for the fish. Bright days, the fish will be down deeper. Muddy water, you might be fishing over 20 foot of water, but all the fish is in the top 5 foot. The reason is sunlight penetration. The crappie do not like that sunlight. That's why in Kentucky Lake, you'd better be looking 10 plus feet deep because the light shines through a whole lot further. The muddy water gets less penetration. We were at Truman Lake last year, one of the muddiest lakes in the country. We were fishing 5 foot of water, catching fish 3 to 4 foot deep. Heat index was 105, I think. Crappie 3 foot deep. You're never going to see that in a clear water lake. Muddy water, use a darker colored jig. Use the glass bead, it's going to help you. Clear water lakes, use something closer to the color of a bait fish. Blue, lime generally works pretty good in a clear water lake. Black and silver works really good in a clear water lake. Muddy water, I'm putting on a black and chartreuse or a black and pink every time. Especially in really thick cover, the worst thing you can do is yank on that brush pile. The more you up and down, the further them fish are going to spread. You can let off and you'll feel that fish pulling that line where it's wrapped around. He's trying to get loose. Most of the time, he'll come out of there on his own. You just hold just a little bit of pressure, let him have a little bit of length, and then you can pull him right on out. Which I've done, I think, 3 videos of you seeing me. I set the hook, you see my line. I done grabbed that fish and yanked him in that brush pile. So, and then I sit there, and sometimes it takes me 30 seconds, a minute, minute and a half. But I can get that fish out of there without yanking the brush pile out. Let's move on to spider rigging because we're about out of time.
Here's some Q&A.
Spider rigging. I'm going to try to go through this fairly quick. The biggest thing is Put your butt to the wind. It's a whole lot easier to control your boat. Bait fish swim down current most times. So you'll notice you're catching fish going in one direction but not the other. Then drift with the current, because those crappie are set up face into the current. Here's your structure, they're sitting behind it, they're faced into the current. You want to come with the current so that you're going in the same direction as their food.
And you can keep your baits in the same direction with the current. If you stay at the same speed, the more vertical your lines will stay. Your bait will stay in the water.
Yes, you can go with a lot smaller weight on your line to keep your line going if you're going with the current. Now, if you're going against the current, your lines are going to be tucked underneath that boat pretty hard.
And you're going to see, if you just stop out in the middle of the current and if you don't throw out something to help slow you down, you're just going to pick up a lot of speed real quick, and you're going to be going too fast. It's going to be hard to control.
And then when you do hit the brush pile,
like
all your poles are going to lay under.
You throw a drift sock or two off the back of the boat, or you take a chain, a log chain, or it could be a 3/8 chain. Just throw it off the back of the boat. It could be 12 foot long. Tie a rope to it. Let it get 50 foot out behind the boat. Throw one off each side if one doesn't slow you down enough. They got drift paddles on back of boats, which those are the most convenient. You just push the button, and those things got paddles, and they just
they are nice, but they are expensive.
That's upscale, but better ways.
The chains.
Just throw a chain or a drift sock.
Two of the best in the business, Ronnie Cap, Steve Coleman, still as many sponsors as they've got. I don't know why log chain company ain't sponsoring them. Right. They're still throwing them chains. And the thing is, if you want to go slower, you've got your section of chain, you've got your rope connected to you going to the boat. You want to slow down, you let out more of your line. That'll give you more friction in the bottom. If you want to speed up, you pull part of the line in, and it'll bring less lengths of chain dragging the bottom. So to speed up, you pull the rope in. To slow down, you let the rope out. Setting up on brush pile if you're going to hover, because the water temperature is low, the crappie aren't real active. They're pretty well sitting still. If you're going to hover, you want to go out to the center. I know my brush pile is right here. I'm going to stop out here in the middle away from it. Just kill my engine. I'm going to sit there for a second. I might even drink me a pop or something, just waiting. I want to know where the wind and the current's going to push me. And that's how I will approach that brush pile. Because you don't want to have the wind and the current pushing you over the top of the brush pile while you're trying to pull a fish out of it. So you will go to the downwind or down current side. That way when you get up to the brush pile and you snag that fish, kill your trolling motor, it automatically pushes you away from them fish. So you're not tangling all your poles up, you're not busting the brush pile and scattering all your fish everywhere. So that's my #1 tip for setting up on a brush pile, is approach from the downwind or down current side. They will, a lot of y'all have had fish just shut completely off. No matter what you do, drop of a hat, they're shut off. An hour later, they'll turn back on and turn on with a fury. What they've done, they've separated, they went out from that brush pile, and now they're just out there hanging out. They're out in that current, and they're not an endurance fish, so they're wanting to go back to that brush pile, but for some reason they've spooked. They haven't went to the other end of the lake. They haven't packed up and moved to Texas. They're 10 feet from that brush pile. But you can throw that bait in front of them all you want. They're spooked. They ain't gonna bite. Give them a little bit. Go eat you a sandwich, get you some breakfast, come back. An hour later, you'll catch fish on that brush pile. They will come back into that brush pile because that's their home. That is where they live.
Usually, you're going to find several different things that fish in one area. If you don't catch on one, jump over to another one. Try the same things, go through the same scenarios. And once you get that all dialed in, your depth, your color, how fast you want to jig it or move it, you'll see that it's a pattern that you can go to another spot in the same depth of water, a piece of structure, there's fish on it. Use that same pattern that you did on that other one, you're going to catch fish.
That's in a nutshell, pattern. If you're catching fish right here and you're wearing them out, stop and ask yourself, why did I catch fish right there? You got a log jam on the side of the main channel. Okay, well, your fish is shut down, or you've caught the more aggressive fish and you want to go find something else to fish. Repeat. It's a pattern. You found them on a log jam, you go down that channel until you find another log jam. You stop and fish it. And there's going to be fish there. I don't care what end of the lake you're on, what side of the lake you're on. If they do it right here, that lake, they're going to be doing it over there. And most of the time, if you're in the same state, that's where they're going to be set up on the next lake in the same time period, same scenario. But keep on changing stuff out until you find what it is they're hitting on. There's one question that I was asked and I answered wrong once. Never made that mistake again. Guy asked me, I was complaining and the fish shut off. I couldn't get them to do anything. He said, well, what'd you do different? Nothing. That's your problem. You've got to be versatile. You've got to be able to change colors, even though it's your favorite lure. It's worked 100 times before. Try something totally different. You've got to stay open-minded and try something different. Spider rigging, brush piles. I come up to a brush pile and I've side scanned it. I can see it's 5 foot off the bottom in 20 foot of water. I'm gonna start out at 13 to 14 foot deep. I'm gonna try to fish straight over the top of it first. Most of your aggressive fish will be hanging near the top of that brush pile. Plus you ain't getting hung up in it. And if you run in there first with your lines dropped all the way down, you done hung all 8 poles, you done shook that thing, every fish that was there is gone. They're hanging out there 10 feet waiting for you to leave so they can go back in their house. So try to fish over the top of it if you're spider rigging first, so that you don't take the chance of losing all the fish that are on that brush pile. Underneath the bridge, put that line in your hand. You're fishing underneath that bridge, but it's still at shallow water. You got to get away from the boat. Put the line in your hand, and when you feel the bite, set the hook back here. And it'll set the hook without having to yank up. Set the hook with this.